Hi, welcome to another episode of Spill the Marketing Beans, and I'm very excited to be talking all about positioning and how is that supposed to work. So many experts around, and today I am so excited to talk to James Doman-Pipe, who is a Senior PMM at Remote, also recently awarded Positioning Maestro of the Year by the Product Marketing Alliance. First of all, congratulations, James, and thank you for being here.
Thanks very much. Excited for the chat.
So let's get right to it. Positioning. I know that traditionally there was that whole format that we had to fit into when you had to simply position a product saying this product comparing against XYZ, these are the benefits, all of that. And then there are all these new methods that we've seen. But take us through your process, how when you are given a new product to position, what does your process look like?
Yeah. So first of all, I think that the standard positioning format statement that everyone uses is probably the worst thing that could happen especially in SaaS, because it reduces our value of our product and what our customers want down to just a statement that gets repeated and parroted. Nobody really believes in it. It just becomes meaningless words. So my positioning process, I call it customer-led value positioning.
Nice.
Because it does what it says on the tin. It is focused on who our customers are, and we're trying to understand the value that our product delivers them. So that process generally starts by trying to get all of the assumptions out that our core internal team have about who our customers are, what they want to achieve, and what the value is that our product delivers. The reason we do this is because otherwise later in the process, you're going to have all of these biased assumptions come up, and you're going to be finding reasons to include or exclude them later on, rather than having a really honest conversation up front and asking how confident are we about this specific thing. If a CMO or a product manager has this one belief, it's a good opportunity in the research that we're going to go do to test whether that is true or whether it's just a one-off that we've seen in one customer, for example. We really want to try and find patterns. Positioning is about patterns. And so that's really cool. Getting those assumptions out, first of all, super important. The output of that is something called a customer empathy map.
Right.
And we use that as a really rough basis to guide our customer research that we're going to do. So I have a list of 19 questions that I rely on and try and get a good enough spread across all of them.
Okay.
From maybe 10, 15 interviews if we can.
Right.
And those interviews are with customers. They are with prospects, with people that we know in the market, analysts, other people that have some interest in and knowledge around, the problem space that we're solving. Those questions fall into four categories.
Okay.
So the first part is about segmentation.
Right.
Who is the person that we're interested in? What do they do? What's their job? Who do they report to? All the kind of standard stuff that you might ask. The next piece, we want to ask about their general problems that they have. So we do the problem discovery.
Yeah.
We're trying to get a really broad view of who our customers are, what they care about, what's going on in their day-to-day, stuff like that. The reason we do that and start really broad is because the literal definition of positioning is to find a space in our customers' minds that we can occupy.
Exactly.
How are we going to do that if we don't know what is already in their head? So we have to start super, super broad. And that might be specific software challenges. They're trying to do this specific thing with this category of software. Or it might be professional goals. They want to get a promotion. That's on their mind at the minute. Or they might have really personal goals about, needing to make more money or save time so they can go home and do stuff or something like that. So after we've done that, we have the opportunity to dig in a bit more on the problem that we think those customers have. And so we're validating that problem to some extent. And so we're trying to ask questions about, how does this affect you? What other impact does it have? And then lastly, in this questioning process, we're trying to understand, after giving a brief explanation of what our product does, we're trying to understand how it would work for them. Would it save them time?
Right.
How do they think it would change their life? What would the ultimate value and benefits from their perspective be? So those 4 sections give a ton of data. The next step is to just go through and find all of the patterns amongst those.
Right.
And try to understand, where are the big things that we might want to rely on later? What are the really important themes that are coming out? So we've got all of our assumptions out. We've talked to customers. The next step for me in my process is creating personas.
Right.
These aren't personas in the kind of usual fluffy marketing terminology.
Yeah, I know, because personas can be a little controversial for some people because it's always like a list of assumptions, right? Mostly.
Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to step away from that. We're relying on evidence, not assumptions. And we're focusing on 4 key elements. Their jobs, so the responsibilities and their day-to-day activities, tasks. Their pains, things that frustrate them, annoy them, they want to get rid of. Elements that they want to gain, so things that they would love to have, things that they're trying to achieve. There's not always necessarily an opposite pain to gain, but sometimes there is. And lastly, triggers or motivations. What's galvanizing someone to take action, to search, to switch, or to buy something? So we have a really nice, tight understanding of what our persona is. And you might have, 2 of them or 3 of them, really depending on how many people are in your kind of core stakeholder group. From there, we then get to the really important part, which is trying to extract the value customer wants to achieve, wants to gain. That might be solving a pain. It might be reacting to a trigger.
Yeah.
It might be achieving a gain or doing a job better. I have a quite tight definition for what a value should be.
Okay.
So I think a value is something that is useful to the customer. It's a priority for them. So there's some urgency behind it. And it's something that's going to be worth the cost, the time, or the effort to make happen. Ultimately, that should be, the value should meet all 3 of those tests. Otherwise, it's fine, but it's not going to be as strong as it could be. And so we run all of these values, all of these themes that we're pulling out of the personas and trying to identify, does it meet all 3? Get some level of prioritization in there as well. So that's, a really simple way in this process of going from super raw, unstructured interview data to now, for this customer, we know these are the things that person really wants. These are the things that this person is going to be used. This person is really going to get use out of.
Right.
They are really invested in solving it because there's some urgency behind it. And it's something that they are going to see a positive ROI from. Super, super simple. So then we just get a bit creative. We try to tease out those values and we try to put them into sentences, statements, try and understand, how all of the benefits that our feature delivers, how they all kind of link together. So I have a concept of something called a value nugget, which is the hierarchy between value, benefits, features, and proof points.
Right.
So we try and package all of these up together and you'll have multiple. But the interesting thing about them is that you can move up or move down really easily. So you can move up by asking why. and move down by asking how. So for example, say you are starting with a value. Say that we help you save time. Well, why is that important? Because of this particular benefit, you're going to be able to do something else that's more valuable instead. Why is that important? Because we're going to help you do it through these particular features in our product. And then you can move up a similar way by asking how. And it's a really easy way to train out as well with sales teams, and really easy to give to marketers to create website copy as well. So all of that gets wrapped up in a tagline, a slogan, the typical things you might see on the top hero section of a website page. It's just a really brief description of out of all these things for our customers, how do we summarize the ultimate value and benefits that our product delivers? And we see how that goes. We put the positioning out to test it, we message it accordingly, different channels. We try to prove our confidence in it. So, is it successful in the ways that we want it to be, whether that's through the sales reps, through pitch decks, through outbound emails, through Google Ads. And ultimately we just learn more, iterate, and it just becomes a really nice self-fulfilling prophecy as we get smarter, we get more focused, and we get more confident about what we're doing.
I know you kind of made it like this very nice crystal clear process, and I can imagine the amount of work that would go into something like that, James. I thank you for covering the part of like how you define value. That was very interesting. I want to know, when you ask questions from customers, asking about values and stuff, are there any assumptions that you've already made about your product that you give to them to see how they respond to it? Or do you just directly ask customers saying, what value does it give you?
So often you'll start the conversation with something in mind. The last part of the interview is going to be validating your product.
Right.
So you're going to give them a really quick, detailed description, and then ask them, what do you think of that? How do you think it would help? But often you'll start these conversations, and as you learn more about who they are, what's going on in their life, you'll often see a light bulb switch in your mind, where you slightly twist the description that you're going to give of your product in a way that opens it up, that is different to what you had originally. And that's really interesting, because we're starting to see how people doing the interview are reacting slightly to what we're hearing from customers. And when that happens, it's actually better than having a really kind of descript and discrete description. Because again, we're trying to learn, we're trying to find the edges of what our positioning should be. And that's really interesting to see happen.
So when you also speak to customers, is it only like your best customers you ask these questions from, but do you also look at a pool of customers that aren't entirely excited about your product?
So I usually rely on best fit customers.
Right.
Again, this is an assumption, and there are different ways to look at it. Best fit for your business might be the ones that deliver the most revenue, or it might be the customers that are the most evangelistic about what you're doing, or the customers that have the best product market fit with today. It really depends on the stage of your business and what you think you need next. That can be difficult to determine, but you don't just want to speak with happy customers, because they're only going to tell you, what you want to hear. So you want to try and understand from customers from across the spectrum, really. But the most important thing I would kind of tip is to look outside of your customer base to speak to people. Purely because if you think about, the average website conversion rate, you're probably only getting 2%, 3% of visitors to your website to convert to leads. That means you're missing out on 97% of people that came to your website, weren't interested enough. And so by really learning from those top of funnel potential prospects and customers, That's where you can start to understand, again, what are the edges of my customer base or my ideal customers? Is there more we can do to expand that pool? Or maybe we need to be a bit more focused on excluding some potential customers as well.
Okay, very cool. I love that answer because it wasn't about the happy ones or anything. It was about like the best fit for your product. I really like that. So in that whole positioning exercise, James, what kind of involvement do you have with like the rest of the team? Like, who are the other stakeholders internally that gets involved with you in the whole positioning exercise?
So I found that it works best with 5 or 6 people maximum.
Right.
The reason we want more than just 2 or 3 is because some of the work we're going to do is about looking for patterns. And so we want to split up groups so that they can do effectively half the work each and then review what the other has done to check for mistakes.
Right.
So there's the logistics piece in there as well. But also by involving people from the marketing team, from sales, from customer success, usually someone from product. And I also think it's important for CEOs to be involved in this process as well, because ultimately positioning is a representation or even a driver of your business strategy.
Yeah.
It's really cool to get that kind of opinion into the room, but also make sure they're exposed, those executive level people are exposed to the insights that are coming from customers.
Right. Okay, very cool. So now you've got everybody involved, you have something. I know you already spoke about, when you disseminate in various channels, you kind of see how the messaging works out. But before you do that, how do you test the positioning you've come up with, before you hit launch?
So it really depends on what the company wants to achieve.
Right.
Some companies will just be like, okay, we need new positioning. We need to get something out there because we know what we have today doesn't work. And that will be really quite simple because it's just going to be shared among, internal people. Do we feel confident that this positioning is better than what we have today? Yes or no? And we build up from there, we start to iterate and then launch it externally. The other part is, when we are maybe taking a different angle, we're trying to test it a bit more slowly. There's a bit more risk involved. That's when we need to try and break it down into, as I mentioned earlier, what are the things that we expect positioning to do for us and increase our results. So it can't just be a blanket let's put it out there, see how it performs. It can't just be something that is done super discreetly. It needs to be something where you're going to get confidence that it's doing the job it's meant to be. You think about software development testing, they will have an alpha process where it's done internally. They'll have a beta process where they are testing it with a small number of customers.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that could be, I want to use it, my sales team, I want a couple of people to pick this up entirely, use it in all of their pitches and see how it works. We'll give them a couple of weeks to see that process run through. Or with our marketing team, can we set up some campaigns, some Google AdWords or some social campaigns, for example, that rely on this new messaging to see how it performs? One of the things I think is really interesting is when you can do all of this cross-functionally.
Yeah.
So in my experience, what we've done is pull together a tiger team.
Right.
So a really cross-functional group, 5 or 6 people from different teams, give them this messaging, this new positioning, and say, hey, go and put this into action with this group of customers. And over 5 or 6 weeks, you'll have a much more information as to how it needs to improve, what works and what doesn't work, and what you need to do to build more confidence in that. The positioning isn't going to be something that you just set and forget. It's something that needs to be revisited over and over again. So we're never going to have 100% confidence that positioning is good or better or works. It's just something we're putting out into the world and building our confidence in over time.
So I wanted to ask James, so you mentioned you had that tiger team, working on, making sure that it's like using in like various activities. Is that the sort of approach you would use when you want to ensure that everyone in the company speak the same language, especially when you have new positioning out? Like, what is that approach like, making sure that everyone's like, got it, that's what we're all saying?
So the activation part of positioning. So let's imagine that you have done all of the testing and you're really happy with it.
Yeah.
Now we're going to present it to the rest of the business and say, hey, get on with it. Yeah. The worst thing you can do is do an all hands presentation and expect people to use it.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. Not going to work well at all. Positioning needs to, the activation of positioning has a couple of different levels. The core piece should be about making your customers' lives real in the minds of your sales reps and the rest of your team. So you really have to bring the customer to life. Literally, if you can, do interviews, do all hand interviews with customers, interview them, do podcasts, internal podcasts, anything you can do to help the rest of the team understand, again, who the customer is, what's going on in their lives, what they care about. That's really, really cool, because otherwise they're not going to have anything to ground the value that you're delivering on later.
Yeah.
It's just going to be all a little bit too abstract for them. So if we have actually done that piece, and again, that takes time, if we're starting to make our customers' experiences real for our team, then we can train out the positioning messaging pieces. We can do the decks and the templates and all of that kind of stuff. And it's much stronger because it's connected to a really kind of core piece of empathy for our customers. And that way, people won't just repeat it. It won't just be parroted like the standard positioning statement is, but it's something that people can connect to, and it's something that they will embody and have more confidence in themselves. And that's going to help them tell the story better.
Okay, all right, very cool. So assuming we've done that part of the piece, or maybe let me just throw a scenario your way. We've got a product, little bit of competitive market, and that product that you market maybe have a slight differentiator. What would the positioning exercise look like when you are in like a sea of alternatives and you just have one tiny thing that might work for you?
That is a question that comes up a lot. I think there's a couple of things I'd say to this. Firstly, I think it's more important to use the phrase alternative solutions than competitors.
Right, okay.
Because I tell you, if you ask your customers or potential customers how they are achieving a piece of value, they will tell you, if you ask 10 people, half of them will tell you they don't do that at all anyway, or they've got somebody, they pay to do that. They've got an agency, a freelancer. Maybe one or two people will tell you they're using software to do that. There's a whole world of other ways people are trying to achieve the same value. So if we're looking at that purely just on a software to software comparative level, we're not really going to understand, again, the real ultimate thing a customer is trying to achieve. But often there will be one or two, maybe 3 or 4 competitors that have really similar needs.
Yeah.
The only thing I've worked successfully, or I've seen successfully done, is by focusing the customer segment deeper, niche, become more narrow. Because that way you're not just going to have one small differentiator, you're going to have the differentiator for this customer, and that is going to set you apart. April Dunford calls it being a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah.
And that works really, really well. And it also, again, gives you a bit more of a strategy. If you are struggling to compete against one competitor, try and niche away, angle away from the same market. And you'll see that not only you're going to win more deals, you're going to see more momentum in this whole process as well, because they are seeing much more of their own jobs, pains, gains, and triggers represented in the way you're going to market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, James. One more question. At which point do you think a product marketer feel, okay, this is not working, a repositioning is required? What are like the telltale signs of, thinking we've got to change what we've got?
So the biggest signs I've seen are the ones that are qualitative feedback from sales reps. And it's kind of tricky because sales reps act at very one-to-one level. Everything is about this next deal or this deal.
Yeah.
So the role of product marketers in this is to actually try and understand from qualitative interviews with sales reps what's not working, and then try and look for the patterns that exist within those. That, I think, I've seen again is probably the best way to find out there's actually an issue with core positioning. And sometimes it's going to be a small thing, it's maybe not the right frame of reference, for example. Other times you'll just have a lot of things that you need to redo completely. You don't know who you are, what you're doing, why customers should choose you.
Yeah.
Often, so I do kind of positioning consulting with people as well. And I think the number one people come to me is because they have 10 sales reps.
Okay.
And every sales rep tells a different story when they get on the phone to somebody.
Okay.
There's no consistency
in
that messaging, in that narrative. And that's going to make your product weaker. It's not going to instill the same values in your customers. And that's really important. The consistent narrative, consistent go-to-market story is really, really key.
Okay. One last question. For product marketers that are starting out, they've done their little bit of custom interview, they know their product sort of, what can they do to ensure that they have a solid foundation of positioning?
I think to get a really solid foundation of positioning, product marketers should really double down on the way they connect data and insights from customers to business challenges they are seeing. So, we're trying to I think it's almost like intuition.
Yeah.
When you're talking to customers, like, I think this might be a thing. And sometimes we just let it go. But otherwise, some other times you kind of say, actually, this might be impacting this metric over there. This positioning is part of the whole go-to-market system. Sometimes it's a bit too fluffy and kind of intangible. But again, to understand how positioning impacts business metrics, I think is really, really core.
Okay. Thank you for that, James. Thank you for taking the time to answer all the questions and sharing some very practical things to do as well, and sharing your experience. Congrats again on being Positioning Maestro of the Year and taking the time for us today.
Great. Thanks very much.